This is a short introduction to some heuristics to consider when facing pundits, right or left. When facing an argument in which data and/or statistics are being bandied about, what was the research question or questions or hypothesis asked or addressed in the study? Why is this important? A research question or questions or hypothesis can describe the scope of the research. For one, much hinges on the questions asked in the beginning of a study or the hypothesis presented forth. In academia, researchers sometimes focus on a particular aspect that might not be addressed in previous studies on a topic or in a subject area, thus further contributing new knowledge. Also, this is usually where researchers establish their premise or premises. What studies have been done on this topic prior to this most recent study? Reading through as many pertinent studies on a particular topic or subject enhances understanding of how the research has changed over time, or how researchers have noted changing trends and developments on a topic or in a subject area. What were the intentions of the researchers? Were they addressed in the study? This might be one of the tougher aspects to determine when researching a topic or subject area. Sometimes researchers will identify their intentions within their studies in order to clarify their goals. By doing this, researchers can achieve verisimilitude in the sense that they are seeking to share personal thoughts and goals with their intended audience. What assumptions were addressed prior to the research? Were the assumptions addressed in the analysis of the data or in a follow-up section? Many researchers have a tendency to do this in their studies. Depending on their previous knowledge of the subject matter or topic that they are researching, or the findings or conclusions that they reach in a study. Usually, an inductive approach is where the majority of the data collected might be qualitative. Researchers will identify their assumptions early. If they do not identify their assumptions, then it could be that they did not factor in the research enough to affect the results or outcome, or that the literature they reviewed prior to the study resolved those assumptions. Another aspect to consider when reading a study is if the researchers addressed any limitations. Limitations can pertain to the amount of time, resources, or participants involved in a study, as well as other things. Where does the raw data come from? What demographics were focused on or collected? This is an important aspect of research, since researchers usually carefully select their population pools or participants in order to meet their goals. Sometimes researchers use the same or similar demographics from previous studies, such as race, gender, and age, among many others. Consider sample size as well. Demographics and factors such as these, along with their research questions or hypotheses, are portrayed in their instrumentation, such as a survey, questionnaire, or set of interview questions when administering and collecting their data. So, researchers should also mention how they administered and collected their data. In terms of instrumentation, researchers can adopt a pre-existing instrument and adapt it to fit their purposes. What were the variables, such as dependent, independent, controlled, intervening, moderator, and extraneous? Essentially, variables are anything that contain a quantity or quality that varies. Researchers tend to focus on dependent variables. The kind of variables researchers choose to focus on in their study should best suit their research questions or hypothesis, as well as their intended goals. Sometimes other variables can affect the dependent variables during the course of investigation. If this happens, researchers should mention it in their analysis and findings. What methodology was used to collect the data? What method of analysis was used to interpret the raw data? Researchers usually identify their method or process of collecting, storing, and analyzing data. Sometimes researchers use multiple levels of data collection and analysis that can include qualitative and quantitative approaches. This depends on the purpose of their research. Can the results be replicated, if applicable? This, along with validity and reliability, is important in proving the worth and impact of a study. Other researchers should be able to use the methodology in their own research. What forms of sponsorship did the researchers receive, if applicable? This is not necessarily a requirement, except perhaps for IRB, Institutional Review Board, purposes within academic institutions. Still, it is good to know if a researcher or group of researchers was hired or received funding from organizations. Data does not always equate with facts. Researchers, organizations, and sponsors can be biased in asking their research questions, or they might not address their assumptions, not clarify their intentions, only cite specific sources that, while relevant, might not represent a larger picture, regional, state, national, or global, of the topic or questions being examined. Or they might not clarify that the scope of their research is narrow for a particular study, and they might create and use skewed instrumentation, thus skewing the results. Of course, be aware of the pundits presenting or pressing data in arguments. Try to understand and know their intentions for using such data. Can the facts or statistics derived from data that is obtained through acceptable research methods be portrayed in unbiased ways? When an individual is explaining, describing, or revealing facts or statistics pertaining to a topic, can they completely eliminate their feelings toward those facts or statistics?